I work at Google. I work with the Make the Web Fast team, which is actually a code name for, just kidding, it's exactly what it sounds like. That's exactly what we do. We have a team of awesome and a growing team of people working on everything related to web performance. And that's not to say just accelerating or speeding up Google Web Services, but actually looking at internet at large. So obviously, WordPress plays a big part of that. So this morning, you already heard a lot of great tips for how you can make your site faster. And one of the things, and this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, I spend a lot of time thinking about it, writing about it, and trying to figure out what are the best practices that I can give you. And the problem that I often run into when I talk to other people is there's so many things you could do, but what is the one thing that you can do to your site to actually make it faster, right? We're all busy. We all have many things that we need to do or can do. So what is the one thing that you can take away from this conference that will accelerate your site? So that's a question that I hope we can actually answer within the next 15 minutes. Or if not answer, then give you the tools for how to answer that question. So as with any interesting adventure, the first step is actually to understand what is the problem that we're trying to solve, right? So if we're trying to climb a mountain, we need to understand the terrain. And I think this is actually a good analogy for performance because it's actually it's a hard road to get your site performing well and to keep it performing well. So to do that, I actually decided to run a quick test. With the help of Matt and the WordPress team, I actually ran a couple of tests, or a whole number of tests actually, across the top 1,000 WordPress sites. And I decided to pull out some stats, just so we can understand how's WordPress doing today, what are we up against. So here's the first one. And the median loading time for a WordPress page today is about 11.9 seconds, which is a very large number. Now, there's a caveat here. The load time includes all of the assets on your page, right? And you'll see a lot of these graphs in the subsequent slides. I'll just quickly explain what they mean. So this is the data for the top 1,000 WordPress sites. The frequency, or these bar charts here, are the number of sites out of the top 1,000 that fall into this bucket. So in this case, you see that between 2 and 4 seconds, there's about 100 sites that have loaded all of the resources, so the initial page and all of the resources. So you can see that it's a very skewed distribution, and there's a long tail, right? And here are some stats. So I'm going to be using the median number. So the first takeaway is it takes us about roughly 12 seconds to fully load the page, all assets, everything included. Now, the good news is the browser doesn't need to wait 12 seconds to load the page, right? You can actually get something visible such that the user can start interacting with this content on the page. So this is the time to first paint. So it takes about 2 seconds to get something on the screen. And then we start progressively loading these resources, so additional images, assets, so on and so forth. So that's much better. But nonetheless, 2 seconds, that's a long time. And the fact that we have sites that are kind of in this 30 range bucket is a little bit concerning. Now, why does it take so long to render this page? Well, it turns out that the average page on WordPress takes about 113 requests to compose. So this is images, CSS, JavaScript, and all of the other assets. 113 requests, right? That's the median, and about 132, that's your average. And once again, it's a very skewed distribution. So lots of things make up a typical page. Now, across all of those connections, right, we've made 113 requests. I'm tracking DNS lookups, which is to say, how many different host names or servers did you connect to actually fetch all of those resources? And the median here is about 30, right? So we connected 30 distinct servers to compose your page and make 113 requests. And all of that is, we get all of that down to first paint in a browser in 2 seconds, which is quite amazing if you think about it. But so there's a lot going on in here. Now, an average page, once you combine all those resources, is about 1.4 megs on WordPress, which is pretty large. And if you think about it, if you look at this graph, we have a lot of pages that are 2 megabytes, 3 megabytes, 4 megabytes in size. So a typical web page is not a lightweight page. I think a lot of us have this assumption that I'll just download 50 kilobytes and everything is fast. This is why loading your page on a mobile phone can be sometimes so painful, right? Because we're trying to fetch 1 megabyte plus of content on your mobile phone. So just a quick summary, right? 2 seconds to paint something on the screen. This is the first time that we can actually show something to the user. 12 seconds to load all the resources, 113 requests, 30 different servers, 1.4 megs. Turns out this is actually not that far from your kind of global internet average. One of the projects we have at Google, or that's powered by Googlers, is the HTTP archive, where we collect this data or similar data across many different sites. And the current stats for kind of the rest of the internet, if you will, are a little bit lower than WordPress. So it takes about 114 requests, and the average page is just over 1 megabyte. So that tells me that WordPress sites are likely a little bit more media heavy, which kind of makes sense, right? We're sharing a lot of images, blog posts, all that kind of stuff. So this is not unusual, right? This is the first takeaway. Now, I know what you're wondering, right? You saw a lot of those long tails. So the question is, who's in that long tail, right? It's always interesting to look at the outliers to understand, you know, who is the winner in this performance game. So as you know, or as me, now you know, I guess, a lot of the CNN sites are powered by WordPress. And it turns out that Anderson Cooper, every time you visit, the first visit to this site will take 466 requests in your browser. And that will add up to 7.3 or 13 megabytes. So I challenge you to open this page on your mobile phone. Actually, it'll load fine on the mobile phone because they actually have a mobile version. But please don't try to open the desktop version on the mobile phone because that'll just like destroy your data plan in one page load. So that's what we're trying to optimize. That's what we're trying to work with, right? Now the next step here is to understand what's available. What are the best practices? How are we doing? So a couple of earlier speakers have talked about this, but I have some numbers here. I looked at across all of the assets on these top 1,000 sites, how many of the assets are actually being cached? And it turns out that in about 30% of the cases, we are not adding the proper cache headers, which means that every time you come to the page, we have to refetch that resource, even though it could have been cached, and we wouldn't have to do that. So there's still lots of room for improvement there. So that's caching. CDN. Turns out a lot of sites are actually starting to use CDNs, which is great, right? You can get your content closer to the user, serve that content faster. Same thing. It's actually comes out to be roughly the same. 30% of assets, and it's actually more than 30, right? I'm just using the median here. If you look at this distribution, you can see that we can do a lot more by putting our assets into CDN, something like CloudFront or any other CDN that you Akamai, so on and so forth. So lots of room for improvement there. The good news is, we heard about gzip. Turns out gzip is actually pretty well adopted for the WordPress community, which is great. It's a little bit misleading here. You see the median 100. That doesn't mean that everybody has gzip. If you look at these numbers here, there's probably 150 to 200 sites that don't have gzip enabled. So there's still some room for improvement. So definitely check out the instructions from some of the previous speakers for how to enable that. And then finally, image compression, which we also heard about, is a very, very important thing. And the reason is that out of that 1.4 megabytes of content, more than half of it is usually in images. So picking the right image format for your images is incredibly important because it allows you to save bandwidth and decrease the overall weight of the page. So JPEG versus PNG, so on and so forth. So as you can see, 80% of the time, median, we are actually picking a good image format, but 20% of the time, we're picking a format that is actually bloated, and we could do much better if we used a different format. So high-level takeaways. There's still a lot of things that are not being cached. We could do a lot better with CDNs, and image compression is a big, big thing that we should focus on. And what these numbers tell me is also that roughly 1 in 3, right? There's a 1 in 3 chance that some of us here are not applying these practices. So what that also means is between yourself and the 2 people on both of your sides, one of you 3 is not applying all of these optimizations. So the takeaway after this is figure out who on either of your side, or if it's yourself, is not doing that, talk to them and get them to do it. And then we'll be a much better place. So next step is to determine your route. So the thing about web performance is it's not a checklist. I'm more than happy to give you a top 10 list or top 20 list, but that's not what it is. You don't just run through the checklist and you say, I'm done. Performance it's a process. It's something you need to pay attention to all the time. And you need to understand what is your bottleneck today, right? What is the one thing that you can do to optimize your site? So you need to measure for your users on your site with respect to your goals, because your goals may be very different than mine, right? I could actually customize my WordPress to be an e-commerce store, And my goals are going to be incredibly different from yours if you're running a regular blog or a media blog. So the good news is, first, a little bit of bad news. So the bad news is there's a lot of things that could go bad, right? This is a diagram with a lot of black labels, and each one of those effectively represents, like, here's one thing that could go wrong when your WordPress page loads. And there's a lot of things in here. There's a network, there's a server, there's a browser. Good news is there's actually a spec, and the browsers today actually provide you all of this data from your users. If you're familiar with developer tools in Chrome, you can open this up, type in performance.timing, and you get all of these metrics. Even better news, Google Analytics collects all of this data for you. It's actually available in your account today. And you can see how long the server took to respond, how long it took how long the DNS lookup took, how long the JavaScript took, so on and so forth. All of this data is available already if you're using Google Analytics. So check it out. That also means that you have all the flexibility and the power of Google Analytics. You can segment traffic. So for example, here, I've segmented my traffic across Singapore, Japan, and San Francisco. And you can see the spike in loading time here for Singapore. Turns out one of the resources that I had on my site was failing in Singapore. So it didn't affect anybody in North America, but perhaps I was doing something wrong, or one of my CDN providers was doing something wrong, and hence a problem. You can find these things in Google Analytics. We even give you detailed histograms, performance histograms across your entire site and for any specific page on your site. So all of that data is there. And the key point here is this is not a synthetic test where I've set up a test and I've sent 1,000 requests to your server and I'm giving you data. This is real users coming to your site. We're collecting their data on their network, from their browser, from in their conditions. So this means that you can actually see how real users, there's a kind of a new keyword in the web performance community, which is RUM, real user measurement. All of this data is available to you in Google Analytics, all for a price of $0, one-time special. So go check it out. And what this allows you to do is to, instead of saying things like, oh, I should turn on gzip compression, or I should really think about mobile, with this data, you can actually look at your reports. You can set up these reports and then figure out things like, you know what, I really, like, North America is fine, but I really need a CDN in Asia. Or maybe my desktop visitors are fine, but my mobile browser or my mobile site is not doing well. Or maybe it is my server, after all. That's where I should focus. Find your bottleneck, fix that, and then repeat. Right? That is how performance works. It's not a checklist. And then last thing I want to share with you is, this is the last step, the optimize step. You can, of course, do all of this yourself. And there's a lot of things you can do. But I have an even better tip, which is you can automate this stuff. So one of the projects we have at Google is this extension or module for Apache called Mod PageSpeed. And what it does is it automatically applies many of the filters and many of the optimizations that you've heard about today and many others on the fly, such that you don't have to think about it. So it's an open source Apache module. It's free. It's available. And it does many, many different things. It's probably too small of a font for you guys to see. But I just pulled out a few of the optimizations that Mod PageSpeed can do. It can rewrite images on the fly. So for example, remember how I said that it's important to pick the right image format? We will actually look at the images that you're serving, rewrite them on the fly. We can even do things like we'll look at the user agent and say, hey, this is Opera or this is Chrome. Chrome supports WebP. WebP has better compression. We'll serve a WebP image to this client. That's not something you can do yourself or manually. So the point here is, we are the 1%. We are responsible for building these sites, and then we hand them over to real users. And real users don't think about web performance. These optimizations don't survive contact with the real user. If you have an automated solution, these optimizations will be always applied, and you don't have to think about it. You can turn it on, and you don't have to think about, did I compress that image? Can I inline this file? All of these optimizations can be done for you on the fly. So definitely give it a try. And so just a quick overview. Here are the 4 steps. Understand the problem. Understand what are the things that you can do. Then go and measure your performance problem. It's not a checklist. You need to repeat this process all the time. So in Google Analytics, set up a weekly report. You can get a PDF report emailed to you every day or every week to tell you what are the things you should be focusing on. And with that, I think we'll take some questions.
Questions? There's one up there. You can applaud while we do the questions. Good idea.
Maybe just a quick note while we're waiting for the mics. The slides are at bit.ly/wordperf. You can find all the numbers there, and I'll be around all day today, so if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to chat.
Wave hard, Peter.
Hey, thanks for doing this talk. Do you have anything like, or is there anything like mod page speed for Nginx?
Right, so the question is, do we have a mod page speed for Nginx? We are definitely aware of the need for mod page speed for Nginx, and we're looking at starting that project, but there's not a module for Nginx today. One thing that can work if you have to use Nginx, some of our users have done this, is they actually run WordPress on Apache, and they put an Nginx in front. So basically, they treat it as an optimization proxy.
Hi, I really like the price point on the analytics, but you know, I'm a long way from an expert. So for me to get the analytics and the numbers, like the average redirection time, I mean, I don't know if that's fast on my site or horridly slow. So is there a comparison? I mean, is there some sort of way to say, oh, you know, you're a heavy media or you're just blog text? You know, you should look more like this to be a fully optimized site.
Yeah, so the numbers that I shared at the beginning, which are kind of global numbers for, you know, what is the average page load time? What is the average time to load on screen? That was the intent, right? So this is across the top 1,000 sites, and those top 1,000 sites may not be representative, right, with respect to your audience. But I think it's a good benchmark to just kind of keep it in the back of your head to say, well, am I rendering content to screen in less than 2 seconds? If so, I'm probably doing better than most, which is a start. And you know, one point I'll make about analytics is a lot of people focus on the tool, like what's the best analytics tool that I can use? I think that's not right. You need to spend 80% of your time and money on the analysis part and 20% on the tool. So pick a tool. Any tool will do, frankly. There's a lot of good analytics tools. But invest some time, you know, spend a weekend reading about what do these metrics mean. And as opposed to vice versa. You'll never get a tool for 80% of your money that'll give you insights, you know, into the things you should do.
Thanks, Ilya.
All right, awesome. Thank you.